All right, now we're going to talk about creating the Constitution. We formed a country. We had the weak Articles of Confederation. So now we're changing our laws to create a more powerful central government while still having some control in the states and local governments. That's why it's federalism and not a confederation. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to study the flow chart about developing a constitution, and we're going to answer the questions. So the first is the Virginia Plan. Remember we talked about the House of Burgesses, and I told you that we were going to talk about that again when we were talking about the Constitution. So the Virginia Plan was all about the House of Burgesses. They had a strong two-house national legislature, lower chamber, which is chosen by the people, the House of Representatives, and the upper chamber would be chosen by the lower chamber. Ideally, that would be the Senate. In each house, the number of legislators per state was determined by the state population, our House of Representatives. The legislature chooses a chief executive with strong powers. The New Jersey Plan put forth a single house national legislature with one vote for each state. The nation remains a confederation of sovereign states, but Congress has the power to levy taxes and regulate trade, and they propose that the legislature elects a weak executive. In the Connecticut Compromise, they put the two together and found two House national legislatures. Each state receives two senators in the Senate. Representation in the House of Representatives was determined by the state population, and the voters elect a president through the Electoral College system. And we're going to look at the Electoral College system later when we talk about the president. So prior to the compromise, so prior to the Connecticut Compromise, which plan did the large states support? What do you think, Virginia or New Jersey? So which one gave more power to larger states? So it didn't talk anything about the population. So the large states supported the Virginia plan because it gave them greater representation in the legislature. They were all about the power. So which plan most closely resembled the government created by the Articles of Confederation? So which one had the weak central government? That's going to be the New Jersey plan, because it says it remains a confederation of sovereign states and they have a weak executive, a weak central. How did the Connecticut Compromise favor the small states, and how did it favor the large states? So the compromise gave the small states equal representation in the Senate, and it gave the large states greater representation in the House because it was based on population. So now that we reviewed that, let's go over the Constitutional Convention. The delegates abandoned the Articles of Confederation and established a limited and representative government, and they divided government powers among three branches. The Virginia Plan, supported by the populous states, the bigger states, proposed legislative representation based on state population. The New Jersey Plan, supported by the less populous states, proposed equal representation for each state. The Connecticut Compromise had a two-part legislature with representation according to population in one part and two members from each state in the other. The electoral system resolved disagreement over how the president would be elected. Compromises over slavery enabled the delegates to create a new government, but it did not resolve the issue. Under the Three-Fifths Compromise, 3/5 of the enslaved African Americans were counted for both representation and tax purposes. A third compromise gave Congress the power to regulate foreign and interstate commerce, that means business between the states, and prevented banning of the slave trade before 1808. The South's exports were protected by prohibiting Congress from imposing export taxes. Federalists favored the Constitution, while Anti-Federalists, who feared a strong national government, opposed it. Anti-Federalists demanded a Bill of Rights to guarantee the citizens' freedoms. The Federalist Papers were written to defend the new Constitution and the ratification battle in New York. So they would literally publish letters to each other in the newspaper under pseudonyms quite often, so they could have this debate. One of the new government's first actions was approval of the amendments, which became known as the Bill of Rights. Oops. So now let's watch this video.
On September 17, 1787, a convention of delegates meeting in Philadelphia adopted the Constitution. That was the first step towards it becoming the law of the land. Now, the states had to ratify it. The convention ruled that only 9 of the 13 states needed to do so for the new government to go into effect. There were strong opinions on both sides of the ratification issue. Those who opposed it were called Anti-Federalists. Their leading voices included George Clinton, the governor of New York, and Robert Yates, a convention delegate, also from New York. They believed the Constitution gave too much power to the federal government. They also criticized the absence of a Bill of Rights guaranteeing individual liberties such as freedom of speech. Those in favor of ratifying the Constitution were called Federalists. Their spokesmen included Founding Fathers Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, and James Madison. They expressed their views in a series of essays known as the Federalist Papers, considered by many to be the best commentary on the principles of government ever written. The Federalists believed that an energetic federal government was needed to protect the nation and ensure its prosperity. They opposed the inclusion of a Bill of Rights, fearing that it might be interpreted as the only rights people had. As the states debated whether to ratify the Constitution, it became clear that without a Bill of Rights, it would not be accepted. The Federalists conceded the point and agreed to recommend a list of rights that would eventually become the first 10 amendments of the Constitution. On June 21, 1788, New Hampshire became the 9th state to ratify. Upon receiving the news, the Congress of the Confederation set a timetable for the start of operations under the Constitution. On March 4, 1789, the government of the United States as we know it officially began.
All right, so now let's look at, oops, did I not pull it? There it is. Different statements by Federalists and Anti-Federalists. So we're going to determine who said it. So each of the following statements was made by a Federalist or an Anti-Federalist. We're going to identify whether the statements are Federalist or Anti-Federalist. So remember, the Federalists were pro-national government and anti-Bill of Rights, and the Anti-Federalists were against a strong national government and pro-Bill of Rights. So the first one, it, meaning Congress, has the authority to make laws which will affect the lives, liberty, and property of every man in the United States. Nor can the Constitution or laws of any state in any way prevent or impede the full and complete execution of every power given. I think that's Federalist because I think it's in support. Oh, nope, I was wrong. I was wrong. The Anti-Federalist, Brutus, Anti-Federalist paper number 17, expresses concern that a powerful national legislature will override the authority of the states. The next one, let's see if I get this one right. The powers delegated by the proposed Constitution to the federal government are few and defined. Those which are to remain in the state governments are numerous and indefinite. Well, let's see. Federalist James Madison in Federalist paper number 45 argues that the Constitution limits the federal government's powers while the states will retain numerous significant powers. The next one, in giving such immense, such unlimited powers, was there no necessity of a Bill of Rights to secure to the people their liberties? Well, let's see. Nope, it's not Federalist. It's Anti-Federalist. An old Whig Anti-Federalist paper number 46 criticizes the lack of a Bill of Rights to protect individual liberties from a powerful government. As to those just causes of war which proceed from direct and unlawful violence, it appears equally clear to me that one good national government affords vastly more security against dangers of that sort than can be derived from any other quarter. I think it's Federalist because it says one good national government. I was right. John Jay, Federalist Paper number 3, believes that a strong central government is better able to defend against the nation's enemies. Next one, in the Compound Republic of America, the power surrendered by the people is first divided between 2 district governments, and then the portion allotted to each subdivided among distinct and separate departments. Hence, a double security arises to the rights of the people. Federalist. James Madison, Federalist Paper number 51, argues that the division of power in the new federal government will protect the rights of the people, because he says that it's double security. Last one. To grant, therefore, such an ample power of taxation and the right of soil to the amount of millions upon the recommendation of this honorable convention, without either knowing the amount of the national debt or the annual expenses of government, would not argue, in my opinion, the highest degree of prudence. I'm going to say anti-federalist. I was right. A farmer, Anti-Federalist Paper number 13, fears that the expenses and debt of the national government would result in heavy taxation. So now what I need for you to do is to go into your Canvas and do the reading essentials, answer the discussion question, take the quiz, and then complete the Edgenuity module assigned for today.